ready to rock and roll?
I've got a few minutes.
I got 6:32 actually, to be quite frank, and it's
What have you got?
outrageous that I've waited this long.
6:32.
Oh, okay, I need to change my watch.
Josh, if maybe you could sign off and sign back on. Say anything.
We could make up a story. Yeah, I mean, we could always just make up lines for it.
I speak for no one.
But do it out of sync. All right, we still have Josh trying to come back in. All right.
Lost all my pictures in a
That's a
fire.
pretty color.
Got this.
You know that?
Went
Lost
to
all my
Sam
pictures in a
Madden's
fire.
corner
My
in the
parents'
fall.
house, yeah.
Very cold, and it wasn't properly dressed. Oh,
All right, what about now?
Yes.
That's pretty loud.
Okay, I'll tone it down. Just wanted to make sure everyone could hear me.
Loud and clear.
Waiting for the agenda to open up.
I'm waiting for the throngs of the public to arrive.
There's a lot of congestion at the door.
Oh, they're all wedged in the door.
Yeah, it's
If it locks.
I did on that, yeah.
Just kidding.
There was all kinds of excitement on the way here. The fire engine was coming through and
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
they were chasing me.
You slipped in here.
Slipped in,
And got
yep.
away.
All right, let's rock and roll. We're gonna-
Recording in progress.
I'd like to welcome everyone to the Planning Commission meeting, May 23rd, 2024. We have the agenda. Are there any changes that you want to call out from a staff perspective?
None for me.
And I would take a motion from the commission to accept the agenda as presented.
So moved.
second.
Moved by Shu, seconded by Paula. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Agenda is accepted, whatever number we are. 6-0. At this point, we have the public to be heard. Is there anyone from the public that would like to speak? This is the time for items that are not on our agenda. Okay, we're moving on. We're just got to slow down. I'm going to have a hard time keeping this pace up. The next item on our agenda is the approval of minutes from May 9th. This is an odd sort, and we can probably have them pushed to the end in the future, but doesn't matter too much. So I would take a motion for the minutes of 5-9.
I'll make a motion
So
to
moved.
approve the minutes.
Moved by Georgia, seconded by Josh. Close second. Does anyone want to offer any additions, amendments, corrections to the minutes that have not been presented to Sharon as of yet? Hearing none, all those in favor of the minutes as presented signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries 6-0. Minutes are approved. Okay, I'm losing my train of thought.
Oh, sorry, we don't have a copy printed out for you.
No, that's okay. I'm joking. So our work plan discussion. So that's
Okay.
next on our agenda.
All right, so you'll remember back, I think in March, we had a work plan discussion.
Yep.
So this is a little bit of a repeat, but the reason why I'm really bringing it before you today is that the select board, or really management, has asked for an update of the work plan and progress, and to be, I think on Friday, I have to send it off for the select board. So I just wanted to make sure that it looked good, you were okay with what's on it, and yeah, just to get that going. So what's different really here is that there's an extra column that's on the far right, that it just says what the progress is.
Is that in our pack?
Yes,
It's
yeah.
page 7.
Is this it?
Yep.
Okay.
So I can do a quick little run through town plan. We're done, yay! For another 8 years. Development review is going to be ongoing, really until the transition to the DRB happens. In that case, then it will, shift over out of your camp over to the DRB. DRB transition itself is on your work plan, and we're in progress, and I think we're on track to make that happen. Sort of on a related note, that applications headed your way, we want to make sure things aren't caught midstream. I know we've talked about this, but accepting new applications, I wouldn't imagine we do September, October, and depending on the project, if it's a consent agenda or something really simple, it could be a little bit later, but don't want to get stuck in the middle of something
Big.
and not have it.
Let's circle back to, when you've gone through, let's circle
Sure.
back to the transition, because I want to
Yeah.
talk about that a little bit more.
Okay. 8090 Upper Main Street site planning. That is just kicking off now. We just signed the contract with the consultant. So in the scope of work, there are meetings with the public, meetings with the select board. Don't think there's one specifically with the planning commission, but we're still working out the public engagement plan. I really do want you all to be involved in that project.
I'm interested.
To some, what degree. On a related note too, thinking if we have maybe one representative from the planning commission that's really a part of the steering committee for it. So that's something to consider.
It's going to have to come back to the DRB. It's after January 1 anyways, right? For site plan and all
Well,
that.
yeah, then this is just figuring out what we're going to do.
I get it, but I mean,
honestly.
it's got to come through, so it should be, there's advantage in having some engagement up front.
Sure. So the bylaw modernization grant is something that's been kind of lingering. I think the hope is to have something before you, probably at the second meeting in June. This would be some sort of presentation from the Regional Planning Commission. And really the contract with the Regional Planning Commission ends on June 30th. I think the grant itself, we can still do stuff through July. So if it doesn't work for that June, we could extend it to a July meeting. Zoning update is something that we're in progress with. Big zoning updates. This would be something like the RPDI, PUD regulations, maybe some ETC next, 40 per hour. Other, not started yet. I don't see this starting until January at the earliest. Official map is probably starting this summer of 2025. We'd thought that would start sooner, but just with the Upper Main Street planning, really figured that needed to come first. And state designation programs. The program is most likely changing. The legislature passed change to statute, really doing away with all the state designation programs and renaming them, kind of reorganizing them. It is not signed by the governor yet, so I don't know what's going to happen. I would, if it passes, I think it'd be really helpful to walk that all through with you all, so we all understand what they are. But really, it's looking at, instead of having these really specific designations, it's like, here's your kind of downtown, your village growth area, and then you have like a neighborhood area from that, and then kind of like rural or enterprise zone, which would be more like industrial. So that pursuing any sort of state designation is on hold until it's figured out. And it also sounds like they don't even fully have it figured out on how it would be implemented and what the process fully is. I think they're supposed to have that figured out by January 1st. We'll see. The part of it would be coming from the Regional Planning Commission too, so they would be the ones who would essentially being or in agreement with what we would want to see as our growth areas, and they would be a part of the application process, from my understanding. So that's kind of the quick summary of where we are, where we're going, what's to come, and what's on hold.
It is freezing in here.
I wonder if you have a thing
Blowing on you.
blowing on you. 'Cause I feel fine.
Bring a blanket next time.
Does anyone have any questions? I know, Dustin, you have your DRB thing. Anything else that anyone wants to?
Maybe this is a dumb question. I'm just wondering what the outcome of the bylaw modernization grant will be.
Well, to be seen.
Yeah.
I haven't really fully seen it yet, but it's really, I think the last time you saw it, which was quite a while ago, was looking at the Susie Wilson Road area and just trying to get an idea of the density that we're thinking could happen. So staff, including Aaron and Annie, Public Works, went through it with Regional Planning Commission, looking at that area, but then also Route 15 area, from about like Sand Hill down to like Allen Martin Drive, so kind of some residential there. And really, this relates to a later topic with the zoning regulations, but sewer capacity has been a big issue with this the DRB right away, but have them in place for the January 1st date. So if there's applications that are in progress, those new or existing planning commissioners or ZBA members switch would be at least participating by listening in proceedings. So anyone who's on the planning commission or zoning board that wants to be on the DRB would be expected to interview. And the understanding is that there's support for the institutional knowledge that existing members bring, and there'd be support to make that transition.
They asked me when I interviewed for a permanent position as opposed to, well, I guess they're both permanent, but anyway.
Right, a voting member, or whatever.
Yeah, not an alternate. They asked me which I would prefer, and you know, I don't know that I was really ready to give an answer, but I did. I mean, I said, well, I think that I would want to be on the DRB, but I would probably attend a number of the planning commission meetings because I'm interested in both.
So, is that,
There's still the really, really big gap, because the DRB, without knowing what our makeup is gonna be, the DRB is gonna be new process, because the ZBA members, if they wanna apply for the DRB, it's not the same process they were using as zoning board members. If they shift to the planning commission, they're gonna have to be interviewed,
right?
and that's only assuming that members of the planning commission decide to step down and shuffle. So personally, I think we maybe should have more formal discussion with the select board and the zoning board and see if we can get buy-in with some more defined process to maintain the institutional knowledge. Because you don't have a way right now to say there's institutional knowledge transfer. And I know, there are some of us that have a interest in planning and an interest in development review and so forth, and that's all up in the air. I don't have a clear picture on how to do this right now, but I feel we need to have a more definitive approach before September, October, November.
Well, for sure. I think what would be helpful at that joint meeting with the zoning board did a sort of informal question of who wants to be where. Not everybody was here from the zoning board. I'm sure all the PC members were here, but getting a better picture of who wants to end up where. And so we at least have that. I'm pretty confident that the select board is respectful. From everything I've heard them say and management say, that they're respectful of the institutional knowledge. I think it would, like what you were saying, is important that there be maybe some training after we know who the members are on the DRB, just to make sure everyone understands the process. And so that wouldn't be, they wouldn't be acting.
If we've stopped applications from coming in the door, we don't necessarily have things to do joint review on and joint evaluation and joint learning and so forth, and knowledge transfer. If you had a clean slate, I'll put this on you. If you had a clean slate and you had a DRB that was starting out, what would be important for that DRB?
I think it's important to understand what the role of development review is, and it's review is based on regulations. It's not based on opinion. Not what you want to see, what the regulations say. So a member, now a PC member, zoning board member needs to know. I think it would be important to understand the process of how to run a meeting, the order of things, what's important to have in a decision as well. And does it have to be how the planning commission does it?
No.
No. Does it have to be how the ZBA does it? No. So You know, there's a lot of good guidance from the state and VLCT on how to write a good decision, how to run a meeting. So there could be some well-spent time talking and looking at those resources, or talking about and looking at those resources.
So here's a thought off from that, is that between now and whenever we set our cutoff, we have a PC and ZBA, whoever wants to, from those bodies, bring in somebody from either the regional or somebody from the neighboring communities and talk about it, so that the people at the table today have a solid understanding of what's happening. Because I don't know that that's, I'll speak for myself, I don't still have a clear picture of, you know, what the planning commission is going to be doing without the development review, and what the development review is going to be doing without planning as a goal. So I think from my perspective, having the opportunity to have these discussions like now, and let the sitting bodies help drive some better discussion on this, instead of necessarily saying, hey, what, do you want to be on the DRB or planning, or do you want to be on the DRB or plan, to have a better understanding of what that is. And maybe those two bodies can have a joint discussion about where are the strengths of the various members, and where should, you know, what should we offer to the select board. Because it still feels too random right now to me.
Okay.
This is me. It's just, you know, a big change. So somebody who hasn't been institutionalized in this role for a while might not have the same concerns, just because it's more flexible.
I'm probably one of those people, because I was involved in a lot of the committee meetings that, you know, kind of were involved in the pre-joining of the two communities that didn't happen. But there were a lot of discussions that are relevant to this that occurred in some of those side groups that met. And I mean, one of the big things that came out for me is that the planning commission does long-range planning. They're looking down the road, and that's something that is supposed to be done by the planning commission, but the planning commission generally doesn't have enough time with all of the applications and other things to spend the amount of time that's really required to do a thorough job of looking down the road and trying to come up with, and I mean, part of, I think one of the things that worked really well was with the new town center, and when we got to a point where we had a lot of options, and I think Josh will certainly remember this, that we had a meeting here in this room, invited the entire town to come in. We had charts where people could take notes. We had pictures of different things, and people, you know, made notes about what they liked and what they didn't like and what they wanted. And that was for a specific area, I realize that. But, you know, I mean, that model could be used in the long-range planning. I mean, that is something like that. Whereas the DRB is more, there are specific rules and regulations that you need to apply to any application. So that's a little bit different. But understanding what the community wants to see in terms of the entire town, not just the town center, but in terms of the entire town, that's something that's sort of the bailiwick of the planning commission.
I will say that you all just went through the process of updating the town plan,
Right.
which is the ultimate long plan. So I think we already did a lot of that planning, and it's figuring out from that plan what thing you want to tackle next is the planning commission. So that's, I think that instead of coming up like with new projects or new,
Right.
just focus on, do you want to look at forest block, habitat protection? The RPDI was something that people wanted to see. We wanted to talk more about connections, you know, so there are a lot of things in the town
Right.
plan that the planning commission
Right.
could start focusing on.
Yeah.
I'm challenged to accept the statement that planning commission doesn't have time to do planning. And I think that's from my opinion, that's a false assumption that's been propagated and supported and used to spread, you know, as the bandwagon, as the trumpet to lead the parade, to split the functions up. I don't believe we have the same level of staff, whether we have a DRB and a planning commission or we have one. The number of staff isn't changing at this stage. And we've been planning, and we've been doing long-range planning, and we've been doing very effective long-range planning. And the tools that you're talking about, Paula, we've used as the planning commission
Right, yes.
with development review. So,
But the state wants us to be two separate things.
well, the state doesn't. That was pushed through from the town. That
You can
wasn't-
you can have either
Right.
model.
right.
There's
Oh,
no
okay.
difference.
Oh, I
that
thought
was
it was
that
the-
was something that was put forward to the town, and the town chose that.
Oh,
But I
okay.
think there was false assumptions or false presentations that we don't have the time to do planning. It's that we're doing both, and again, it's a moot point because the decision's been made and we're going that direction. But I don't feel it's because we haven't been able to do it. I think it's because
Well,
somebody
the
had
statement that I made was generic in terms of in general, that, you know, development review boards have a lot on their plate, and that separating the two, you know, I mean, I had no skin in the game, so I'm just talking about what I learned at some of the different meetings that I attended in the past 10 years. You know?
Yeah, I guess, so kind of combining what the two of you are saying, I feel like the planning commission's role is pretty well laid out. The DRB's role is laid out. It's a question of how you're going to implement these roles.
yeah.
And developing a sort of reliable communication between the two.
Yeah, and that was discussed, right? Having regular check-ins with the DRB and the planning commission, and then also with the select board is important. And if there are members that are on both boards, that's going to be also seems to be support.
Okay.
So, you know, maybe what I wrote on that work plan is that it's in progress and we have more to do. It's not, we're not done yet with that transition to the DRB.
We're
Just
I
make
mean,
that clear.
you're still true. I mean, it's still valid what you said. We're on track to make the transition.
Yeah.
Because transition's going to happen whether we've got all our ducks in a row or not. So the status is that it's working on it.
True.
It's
but it
here.
wouldn't be hard, or wouldn't cause any harm to lay out a little bit more. Here are some of the next steps.
I'd like to.
That
I
would
mean,
be helpful.
I'd like. And I don't know because we haven't had only the one engagement, but I feel we're missing the boat on engaging with the ZBA because they're doing, you know, they're absolutely affected by this, and their function is going to be rolled into
Right.
part of our function, and all of their function will be rolled into the DRB. So I just
Oh, Trevor can speak for them.
Well, it's been a long time since
Yes.
there was a meeting.
Yeah, that's true.
No, I don't know that I can.
No, I was just joking.
But I mean, I feel it's going to be a reach out. I mean, it's not going to be a passive because they don't have frequent meetings. I don't have a clear picture, but they've obviously, when Hubie and
Nick.
were here, they had things to say.
Yep.
And I think it's a deficit if we don't get a chance to hear
Yeah.
that.
So maybe in July we could hopefully plan on having a joint meeting.
Maybe even have an element of it's
For
not a
June.
joint meeting, it's a workshop on transition.
Yep.
It can be in one of our meeting nights, and we can have a workshop for an hour and do transition work.
Right. So June actually is fine. For some reason in my mind I was thinking
Feels like
skipped
it.
ahead. So a June meeting.
The other item that I'd like to throw in, it's not necessarily specifically part of this, but we ran into conflict with the public last year on the election of officers.
Yep.
I'd like to see if the folks, because this is the commission as it sits. We,
Refresh my memory.
we had members of the public, because we traditionally, our process had been to hold election of officers when we had a full sitting board present. And that was
Oh, I remember that
it was
piece,
it was a process, and it wasn't just, if we didn't have a full member, the
Yep.
commission says, do we want to vote? No,
Okay.
let's wait. And it was just an ongoing thing. It was never ignored. It was just delayed until we had a meeting, or until the meeting that the commissioners that were present said, yes, let's vote. There are members of the public that felt that as of July 1, the existing slate of officers was no longer in existence per statute. I don't know that that was ever resolved, but it generated a lot of conflict, a lot of confusion, and a lot of kerfuffle.
I remember that.
And I'd like to avoid that this year by finding see if we can, if this is the sitting members of the commission, you know, can we commit to electing a slate of officers to be, in effect, first meeting in July? Can we commit to that in the last meeting in June? We all going to be here for that at this stage, to the best of our abilities.
Anybody have a calendar? What are the dates of the meetings in June?
13th and the 27th.
Okay,
And then July is the 11th, 25th.
okay.
So will you be there on the?
I'm scheduled for surgery, but hopefully I'll be done.
So I mean, if we don't have to at this point, this is just an ask.
No, I think it's a good idea.
If we can just nail this
Get our
down,
ducks in a row.
and it can be whatever the term is for, you know, the election can be done, and those officers take effect the first meeting in July. And if we just put that on our calendar, and that'll be done, and it'll be, won't affect the officers that night, but it will just mean that as of July, whatever.
I wonder if when the new boards are reconstituted in January, will the planning commission might have to re-elect people then?
Yeah.
huh?
Definitely.
That's
If
something we
somebody
probably
leaves,
should do
yeah.
as part of the procedural too. is
Figure out
just-
how that works.
Mm-hmm.
But should there be a re-election, or if one of the people stays and one of the people goes?
Yeah,
you
if
just
all the
elect that?
existing officers stay, then
Yeah.
there's no issue.
Because the planning commission doesn't change, its existence doesn't change.
Right,
It's makeup.
right.
So whoever is an existing officer, if they stay.
Less of a concern, but anyways, this is just, we've had sort of a drifting, non-specific date. We've always said July, as of July 1, we elect officers, and we've done it when the first time we've had a full slate. It had worked well up until last year. Just, I'd like to remove the ambiguity.
Right. Yeah, let me check into that. I know the select board has a reorganizational meeting, and select board, that's, essentially would be your first meeting in July.
And that's the piece that was argument, because the argue presented by the public was that as of July 1, existing officers no longer existed. So if we were to vote ahead of time, we would say those officers would be in effect, those officers would take their seats on July 1. And we could still have an organizational meeting and say these are the, whatever. But anyways, yeah, if you want to look into that and see if
Yeah.
there's suggestions.
Yeah, the only issue might be if somebody new was coming on the board as of that meeting.
Right, so I know you were interviewed, and Ian, did you hear anything? I mean, I
No, they said that we probably wouldn't hear until June.
Okay.
we have 2 vacancies. That's
So take a look, Catherine, and see if there's anybody that's got
Still?
anything. If anybody has anything hard and fast against doing it, having the vote done the vote done in June. I think our procedures say we just have to have an organizational meeting once a year. So I don't think there's anything that requires us to have it on a certain date, and a certain thing is just once a year. And we can also do it at any point in time during the year, if we choose to do it again.
All right, I'll try to get a handle on this.
I mean, it's not a big deal, really,
Well,
but
it's not.
it
That's-
generated a lot of,
Right.
of public,
Consternation.
yeah.
Good word.
Okay,
We don't want to relive that.
okay. Zoning regulations.
Okay, so in your packet, there was, this is not a complete packet or even changes that have to take place, but it was really a list of some suggested changes and also a visual start to see what has been done. And there's also I'll just pull up the summary sheet. There's some questions in there that I had. Maybe we can just run this. Okay. So really, this is some of the highlights of a new unified bylaw. So this unified meaning pulling together the subdivision regulations and the zoning regulations. So what I have there is number 1. So Article 5 is in the zoning regulations is the development review section currently, and that's essentially site plan and conditional use review. So the other things that are considered development review now, sort of, are variances and appeals, and that is in a totally different chapter, and that's kind of more in the administration of the bylaws chapter, which I think is fine to keep it that way. But I think what's interesting to me is when we say development review, like now development review also includes subdivision. But it's also handled differently than site plan and conditional use. I mean, they're all kind of handled differently. So as far as how to organize them, kind of, you know, my thought was to keep keep the development review chapter pretty much as is, and then there's a new chapter for subdivision review, which is now becomes Article 6.
Okay, so if that is under the question under number 2, down below.
Yeah.
So what I wrote was rules would need to be specific and clear to avoid appearance of preferential decisions.
What do you mean by that?
That the rules that you're on which you're basing decisions need to be clear, so that you can, whoever's making those decisions can say, this, and this is why I did
Okay,
such and
so
such.
do you mean if we're allowing the zoning administrator?
Yes.
I see, okay. So that is both within the new development review chapter, or changes made in the development review chapter and the subdivision, there is authority by of the zoning administrator to do minor amendments, as well as boundary adjustments and simple parcels, and also subdivision amendments. So it's interesting. As I was trying to figure out the language for this, there's some pretty clear language in statute, which is what's in what I put in, but it is also what was in the regulations back in like 2008. So that's when the consent agenda rules came into play. So it's kind of just reverting back to how it was. And so there is, I think, some clear guidance for the zoning administrator of how to review something and when it would get bumped up to a planning commission review. The zoning administrator would still be reviewing applications as, you know, like a consent agenda in some ways is reviewed, that all the review or all the application materials go out to other staff members. So Public Works looks at it, Recreation looks at it, Fire, Police look at it. And so they're still providing all the comments that would happen if it was coming before the planning. and there's still the ability to put all the conditions on an approval, like there is if it's planning. And there's language in there that says here's what would allow it to be considered, like let's say for a site plan amendment would be, here's where it would be, or would or could or couldn't be reviewed by the zoning administrator. Here's what makes it this is a major, essentially.
So would that remove consent completely?
Yes.
And my comment had nothing to do with present employees, just generically, you know.
Right. Yep. Yeah, so I think what's in there does that, but, you know, we haven't taken a big look at it to see if you all agree with that and you think something else needs to go in there. Yeah, this is our first time really talking about it. So
Right.
we haven't had a chance to sit down and discuss it. By no means, you know, what I have put in there, what we have to, a starting point.
It would be interesting if you know, Sharon could come up with a list maybe of those items with consent that were then rejected from consent. Because there's a list of items that would not be minor. I mean, there's been minor things that have come through and they just don't fit and they're taken off. There's been minor things that have come through and they haven't, there's been no discussion whatsoever. There's the greater preponderance has been in items that have just been accepted as written.
Right.
But there have been enough over time since we started using consent agenda that have been pulled off.
Right. So what is there a theme of those?
Yeah, I mean, what's the
that-
depth? And I'm assuming she's listened to us. I trust Sharon's, you know, interpretation, but to Paula's point, it's not always going to be Sharon. And, you know, what constitutes? So it may be that a consent isn't removed. Maybe the criteria for pushing it to consent is easier to outline. Minor site units are reviewed by the zoning administrator with, if there's significant controversy or significant whatever, that they're pushed up to in a consent. Retain the
To
ability.
me, it makes more sense just to push it up to the planning review. If it needs more discussion, then that always gets pulled up.
Does it say that in there, that, I seem to think, is there language that says that you could appeal the zoning administrator's decision to the planning board?
Yes.
There, it isn't, yeah, I thought I saw.
Yeah, it would get appealed to the DRB, and then anything from there then would get appealed.
But it's less the ones that are rejected by the zoning administrator. And the consent agenda, my recollection was it was put in specifically for those items that were approved by the zoning administrator, that there was dissent among commissioners and public, that they shouldn't have been approved. So instead of, you know, an applicant being upset with the zoning administrator, you know, issuing a negative response or whatever, it was the other way around.
Well,
So anyways,
true,
it's
true. I think though what you're saying with the
criteria.
what's the pattern too
Yeah.
of what has been easy and what hasn't, you know, trying to figure out if the line needs to be changed in language is really what pushes it to a plan or a DRB. If you all are uncomfortable with this change, then you know that it also doesn't stick with consent.
No, I just think that things have to be clear. Yeah. It's when things aren't clear that you run into problems and you go, oh, shit.
Right, yeah. Process, but also the review.
Right.
Can I ask, the reason for this change is mostly just to streamline things, to just make the process move smoother?
It is, and state statute allows it.
Right.
And most recently, state statute has allowed minor subdivisions to be approved by the zoning administrator. So that's kind of, or one of the things that made it sort of like, oh, hey, you know, we could streamline this.
Right.
Statute said we can streamline it, but should we take a look? I think as staff, when we look at some things that are in consent agenda, it seems seems going overboard a little bit. Prepare the whole consent.
Especially for something like a boundary adjustment.
Yeah,
Well,
when
so-
you're redoing something, you just have to ask what could go wrong with this. So,
But and to your point earlier, Catherine, I mean, this hasn't been here in existence that many years. I mean, 2008 is substantial, but it hasn't been that many
You're
years.
calling me old.
No, I'm calling me old. I'm calling me old.
Oh.
And we didn't use consent agenda for quite a few.
Yeah.
I mean, for quite a few of my initial years, there was no consent agenda. I think it was a safety valve to remove condemnation of the zoning administrator for doing something that could be perceived as, you know, wrong, versus having it come up to the whole commission, so you've got a 7-member board reviewing something. So your point about maybe just having things, pushing them to DRB review sooner, maybe that's where the
The
threshold. So
threshold.
I think if you guys take a deeper dive look at the level of consent agenda items in the past few years, I wouldn't go back to the beginning of time, the past few years, to see which ones actually triggered the full PC review versus acceptance of the zoning administrator's preparation. Because if I'm going to say probably 80 to 90% were accepted. Pick a number out of the air.
I think it's higher than
Well,
that. I only remember 2. It got pulled off. In years of 2.
okay. So maybe we do have to go back to the beginning of time. But anyways, I think that's it's just another way of doing things. And if we're going to push them to the review sooner, then, you know, a clear line of anything below this level and anything above that level.
Right. And having a good degree of with that switch is important. Comfort and support.
Thoughts? Anybody has any?
I'm in favor of Article 6. I think it's good. Good plan. There's
Agreed.
still pieces in place that can bump it up to the DRB as needed.
So another thing with the subdivision review is removing the conceptual discussion. If we're attempting to make sketch plan a little less formal, then we maybe don't need that extra step. Or I don't think we. Because essentially, if we're not issuing a decision, which you haven't been recently for sketch, that is much more of the conceptual. You are approving it, saying, yes, we like this, or no, we don't. But you don't have a official decision findings. And
So let's talk about what we've used conceptual before. I mean, the conceptual has been an opportunity for somebody to come in and talk to us informally. No staff review necessarily, no anything. It's just, I have an idea. That's not what sketch is. Sketch is, it goes through staff. So why would we want to remove the idea of a conceptual discussion, which is just a free and open, you know, parlay?
well, maybe it doesn't need to be as formal as it is in the
Okay.
still allow it, but I also wanting to still make sure that sketch isn't.
I think that's fine with sketch, and that would maybe give them a little less of a podium to preach it to us when they say you get approved to
Right.
set sketch, and that's.
Mm-hmm.
But I
Makes sense. Yeah,
for-
I see what you're saying.
for me, the idea of the conceptual, and maybe again, ZBA uses it differently, but it's an informal discussion for somebody to come in and talk an idea to us.
Right. I think that should be true for site plan subdivision. Have it. Because I think sometimes when you have just a site plan, people want to get applicant.
I think it's a conceptual discussion. They could come in, you know, Peter Edelman could come in today and have a conceptual discussion for a whatever.
Right.
And it's not related to a site plan, it's not related to anything. yet.
So with that in mind, then that somehow, I think gets, maybe stays in subdivision, but also gets a little action in site plan after.
Yeah, I mean, it maybe could even have its, yeah, I would think the entry could be in any level of review, Somebody could come in for a conceptual discussion. There's no site plan, there's no formal submission to staff. There's just an idea. Is this something, I mean, literally, is this something you guys even want me to, if somebody came in and said, I want to have a conceptual discussion about putting a 10-story building over by the movie theater. Conceptually, we would probably say, no, we don't see how that could work.
Yeah, we're not talking about, it's more just the concept.
Well, but when we're at the sketch stage, I worry a little bit that if you say, well, like some of the things we've seen, I disagree with a lot that's in it, and you're not I think you mentioned it. We're not conferring any kind of approval on it at that point. Like, what am I saying? Yeah, I guess.
think that the idea of sketch plan would be really just to flush out the issues. So it's, bringing to their attention, just say we're talking about the Essex Way project here, this meeting. We see issues potentially with parking, with your water sewer, with your circulation.
With your lack of vegetation.
But even on a sketch plan, it's been through staff review before it comes to us for discussion.
Or conceptual, you would see.
Conceptual could be somebody walking in the door, you might never have seen any portion of it. I think that's just the difference, and I would like to see us be able to retain that as a option for the public to be able to reach us.
Sure. It's really a lot like really just the back of the napkin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
and I think
I
a
can see
sketch
that.
plan is, if we make it less formal, when we're not issuing a decision and then we probably need to be a little more articulate about what the purpose of the sketch plan is. The difference being it's been through some level of staff review before we even see it.
Can I jump in?
Yes, no, yes?
So, yeah, I tried to raise my hand, but evidently it must not be working. That too. So that's all right. In any event, conceptual applications I can remember only on one hand, just a few. Take Brian Courier's last sketch that came in. He kept calling it his conceptual plan. So I think people, when they say sketch, they're thinking conceptual anyhow. Conceptual does get passed on. Usually a plan comes with it. It gets passed on with a narrative to all the departments. We give the feedback from all the departments to the applicant. And conceptual, we don't write a staff report. What we've been doing with sketch of recent is the exact same thing, but we have been writing a bit of a write-up with some findings, no conditions. Well, actually, I might be a little bit wrong on the conditions, but it's really, we have?
No, we haven't. No, you're right.
Have not, yeah. So it's basically, it's the same thing in my mind. The way our regs read, they could bring 2 or 3 different plans in if they wanted that. I think that's maybe happened once that I can remember. I just think the words, people are, intermingling them, and basically what we do is the same thing. So I just wanted to bring that out there that, whether you deleted the word conceptual out the conceptual section out of our regs completely and called sketch conceptual/sketch or just conceptual, but they're still getting feedback and comments. So between the department meetings and the minutes of what have been stated for concerns, they're still walking away with the same thing. So,
I guess I'm gonna
and they
push-
still have to file an application for conceptual, and they still have to pay a fee for conceptual right now as we speak.
That's news to me, but we've had them walk in the door in the past for conceptual discussion without having any sort of a staff report or anything come to us.
Right, no staff report, just the comments from all the departments for conceptual.
So
So-
what I kind of thought I heard you saying, Justin, was to make conceptual even less formal, so that we don't have comments from departments.
I would-
It's really just somebody, having that option for somebody to come in, have to be on the agenda, so we have to make sure they're on.
I
the
mean, it could,
agenda, but-
it
and
could
there's no
theoretically
fee,
be under
yeah.
public to be heard.
Yeah,
I mean, we could add that as a under
Mm-hmm.
public to be heard conceptual discussion type topic and really make it less formal. I don't,
Yeah.
I'm hesitant.
With
to
all due
suggest-
respect, the people that are coming in for conceptual are usually engineers who have an idea and they want to know what departments are going, I'm going to just say it. They want to know what Public Works is going to, what kind of hiccups are going to be caused by Public Works. So they're looking for staff's feedback.
If,
Yeah, we're getting kind of tangled
I'm
in the
not gonna worry about it
terminology.
anymore. I think we shouldn't shut down an avenue for the public to bring something to the PC that doesn't have to meet certain criteria, because right now, something at sketch or preliminary, it has to be deemed appropriate and complete by staff. It has to hit a threshold. I think there should be an option. I'm not gonna stand on it. I'm not gonna throw myself on the fire if I don't get it, but I think we shouldn't be shutting ourselves off from the public.
well, let's continue the discussion at time. We'll look
Yep.
into it a little bit more.
Think about it.
Yeah, maybe, I don't.
Maybe,
feel like this is-
maybe just coming up with a term for it
Well,
that's,
right, right. It's explained a little differently. Yeah, that the process needs to be clear.
Well, we
idea
do keep an index, so it'd be very easy to see how many conceptual applications have come in the door before you.
Then 4, 5,
Yeah.
maybe 6, something like that. It's a low number.
Yeah,
Anyways,
yeah. I mean, I'm thinking about like if some sort of site plan comes in, there isn't an equivalent to sketch for site plan. So having a conceptual discussion, or even call it a sketch could be for any application.
Yeah.
So if you take away conceptual, or you have conceptual for either, so it would be kind of serving this site plan. I think sometimes it would be helpful. I think sometimes like staff would say, yeah, this looks a little spotty, or we don't really like it, and they just want to get before the planning commission. Okay, well, we don't have to like it, or then it's conceptual, we don't even have to comment on it. Just allow you to see it and go from there.
idea sharing.
Yep.
Application, like, that's what it was. They easily walked away,
Mm-hmm.
not empty-handed. I'm sorry, they got good feedback.
Yeah, they have to come back again.
Right.
So going back to the little memo here, so there was a question about could we do away with simple parcel and a minor subdivision be considered anything between 2 and 3 lots, for example, instead of now it goes up to 5 lots, 3 to 5 lots for a minor. Just, again, state statute says that a minor subdivision can be approved by the ZA. Doesn't tell you what a minor subdivision versus a major subdivision is. I think our minor subdivision up to 5 lots, that's a lot
That could
be.
for a minor.
Yeah.
Be, yeah.
But again, this is just
Kind
an
of
idea
depends
to
on
throw out
where it
there.
is and
So is
what
there-
the lay of the land is, and, yeah.
what are, I know Hubie had mentioned this, what, if there's something that's already being done neighboring wise, we'd have to reinvent the wheel. So are there examples in the neighboring communities where
Yeah.
this is all dealt with?
Yeah.
I mean, if we've got something, we don't have to copy people, but we also don't have to go completely
Reinvent
on
the
our
wheel.
own.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too.
Yep.
I was wondering about that
Yep.
as well.
I think you know, Jericho doesn't have a simple parcel. They have a minor, I think it's 2 to 3
I
lots,
mean,
for example.
yeah.
But yeah, let me look into that. That's a great idea. I'll offer that idea of not reinventing the wheel, but also see what else works elsewhere. Okay. So going on to 3, should I share this again, or are we?
Yeah, sure. Sharon knows she can just bust in now.
Yeah, Sharon just, and Josh too. So looking at this, number 3, other changes. So state statute change, the Home Act says that 1 unit per residential, or 1 space per residential unit within the water and
Number 3,
sewer service areas.
I don't know, I don't have that. I'm looking on the memo, not the.
So that is a requirement. So to me, that makes sense just to change it. The next one, the
I'm
density.
sorry, is that a reduction?
In some cases it's the same. So I think like our accessory apartment has 1.
It-
But
is- Is the idea to discourage people from having cars?
I think it's more just to take up less space for parking. Make it easier to develop more. So that is not true across the whole town, though. It's just in the areas served by water and sewer. So outside of our sewer core, this would not be a requirement to change. So I think it's maybe like 1.6 spaces per unit right.
Yeah.
So also a density requirement of 5 units per acre, areas served by water and sewer. I have some real concerns about this, especially in some areas of town in our sewer service area.
Now, is this starting with parcels that are a minimum of 1 acre, or is this, you're gonna prorate it for a 0.3 acre parcel? You know, 5 per 1, do you start dividing it down? I mean, that's.
Yeah, I don't see anything about them saying like you would round up or down. You would assume you have either 1 parcel that's an acre, or you have several parcels kind of put together. So in some, I think I showed this to you a couple meetings ago, but in couple zoning districts, we already meet this requirement, so it's not a big change. But something like our R1, R2 district, I think even like the B1, depending on what the development is, several of them, it is a change. And in some of those areas are areas where we want to see growth. So we're talking, you know, the ETC next area, that's maybe okay, but when you, the sewer core map that I provided, see if I can.
Well, Josh, didn't you and Dave previously do some analysis of what some of the changes would be in the current residential areas? And
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know where that document is right now, but yeah. And my question with respect to the Home Act, and I don't have it in front of me, was it a requirement? The 5 per acre, was that a requirement if you were simply in the sewer core, or if you were currently able to be connected to water and sewer?
Is the language.
So presume, like, the thing is, that could mean currently, like, I'm in the sewer core, but I'm not served by water and sewer.
Right.
So how would my parcel be rated in that case? Is sort of the interpretive question I have.
Yeah, so my understanding is because it's in the sewer core and you could be served by water and sewer, then it would apply. So, you know, for example, I think it was Wildwood over in Pinewood decided that they were not, so they were in the same sort of that white empty area, like on this map.
Right.
They wanted to have water, or they wanted to have sewer, and so they requested to have it extended. The town said, yes, but you're gonna pay for it, and so there was a bond that was voted on, but they paid for it. It wasn't the rest of the sewer service area people, users who paid for it. It was just they paid for it. And it was extended. So it's no longer that white area. So,
Right, because I live in the Tanglewood White area.
Yep. So I was talking with Aaron and Annie about this yesterday. They're both very concerned about it. And, you know, Annie, like I said, a little bit with the stormwater issues as well as our sewer capacity. I have a meeting tentatively scheduled with the Regional Planning Commission to talk this through a little bit more and see, you know, what exceptions we might be able to have. There is some language in statute that does allow some exceptions. What would we need to do to meet those exceptions? Would it mean that we need to change our sewer core? Is there some sort of ordinance that would need to be changed? I mean, if we allowed the rest of Pinewood, Forestdale, which is, you know, the Greenbrier Drive area, and Birchwood to be hooked up, that would eat up most of our unallocated sewer reserve or capacity.
Some of Forestdale is on sewer, but some of it's not.
Yeah. So it's a big concern. If we want to see growth happening in the areas where we want to see growth, we need to make sure we've the capacity.
And there's no language in the legislation from the state that says like contingent upon sewer capacity. It doesn't talk about that at all.
It does say something about capacity restraints.
Oh,
So there is some potential language there. We just don't know if what we have is enough or what we could do to change it to make it enough. So definitely need to talk to legal about this as well. Sounds like Heinsberg and Colchester are looking into this as well. So we're not alone. So I need to get a better handle of this and share it with you so we can all talk about it a little more.
Because this, I remember when, I think Josh, when you and Dave did that review, you took an area, and, you know, the multiple units, it was a big apartment building. It's 5 units. I mean, you could have a large apartment on a very small lot and nothing around it except single family homes, and it would allow for that.
Right.
And all of a sudden the characteristic of our community changes everywhere.
Right. And I don't necessarily see all of that happening right now, but it could. I mean, if the door's open, it could.
Look at the triplex they put in on Foster Road.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So did I mention to you that for a little bit, the new bill that deals with housing in Act 250, they changed it from 5 units per acre to 12 units per acre. And they took that out. So it almost...
What did they do?
They took that out. They
okay.
suggested change did not go through.
Thank you, Lord.
Can I ask a question? Dusty, before when you were mentioning the 5 units per acre and what that would mean, were you wondering if that would mean that we'd have to have a minimum lot size of 1/5 of an acre? So even if we had a current minimum lot size of, say, a 1/2 acre, we'd have to make a new minimum lot size of 1/5 acre.
Not necessarily, because 5 units does not mean 5 separate units.
I think it might mean that you need to have a minimum of a 1/5 acre lot size.
So our zoning tables would have to have that. Could you have it different ways, that you have an acre and you have 5 single family homes, or you could have 2 duplexes, you could have 1 building that has 5 units.
See, if we had, I mean, going back to the you know, the 0.2 acre, I mean, that's not much different than what the lot sizes that were built in the 1960s, early 60s. Lamell, Perry Levine, it wasn't until Pinewood came along and Birchwood that they started building up. All along Sand Hill, Maple Lawn, those are all small lots. That's not an issue, but it's when they can take, my question was, if you can put 5 units on 1 acre and the buildables, anyways, I don't know enough to keep going on it. My concern was that all of a sudden, in and amongst a bunch of single family homes, which I don't have a concern with those, we would start having large, multifamily homes instead, and the neighborhoods would all be changing. We'd have a bunch of either apartments and or condos versus single family homes. Developments change that way, the character of the neighborhoods change that way, the community changes.
And we'd still have the other regulations like setbacks, and height limits that they'd still have to follow. So we still have other levers that we could use against that. But my understanding is if you had a single unit, it could be on 1/5 of an acre. If it was going to be duplex, it would be on 2/5 of an acre. Triplex would be 3/5 of an acre. But they'd still have to meet the same whatever other requirements we have for setbacks. So we could use that as kind of a break against.
It's really the
Maybe I'm
characteristic, and I think that the prime example for me of a non-characteristic structure in a residential area is the triplex that's on Foster Road. It was put in, it met our existing regulations. There was nothing that could be prevented it. It was completely out of character for that community, that portion of the community.
Well, there's that issue, and then there's the sewer capacity issue.
Absolutely,
Two different
yeah.
ones. Yeah.
Well, anyways,
Well, and
So I
sometimes
was-
go ahead, sorry.
I've been looking at the Home Act while we've been talking, and because I wanted to find out what exactly served by sewer is, and it's on page 6 of 76. It says an area served by municipal sewer and water infrastructure means an area where residential connections and expansions are available to municipal water and direct and indirect discharge wastewater systems and not prohibited by state regulations or permits, identified capacity constraints, or municipally adopted service and capacity agreements. Right, that's kind of what I mean. This may not be a complete blank check if capacity constraints are something that you can say, yes, in theory, this could be super dense because it's in the core, but constraints to actual capacity wouldn't allow it. So it doesn't sound like it's as open-ended as I may have thought.
So my brief conversations are that we probably would need to make some tweaks. Like what we have isn't good enough, but it could be.
excuse me.
Bless you.
So it could be as simple as saying that we have less unassigned capacity, and assign it where we want it to be. So we assign it, an ETC next area, especially the mixed use north and the mixed use south areas. And there's less of it floating around for other areas. I'm working on it and we'll report back.
I'm sorry, can I just ask one other question? For the assigned uses that are already with existing properties, that's based on what we would already expect the density for that property to be. So if somebody comes to us and wants to make it denser and they want to increase their assignment, we'd already have an opportunity to look to see if it actually could be increased. It would trigger that review each time.
It would, and already now with accessory apartments being approved easily, duplexes are approved. There's already more capacity going assigned.
Okay.
So there's the process is that first it starts with what's assigned, then the town manager looks at it and to a certain amount the town can approve, then it goes to the select board to approve the higher amount. So like the Essex way is definitely a select board assignment question.
Getting messy. Yeah.
I feel like I'll just get on a little bit of a soapbox that I feel like we're trying to do our part in town with providing housing, dense development where we want to see it, we need a lot of help from the state.
Yeah.
But
But there are some places that do need
some
the help,
places,
and it's nice to actually have a statewide clear direction. And it's nice also that we're already heading in that direction.
we're kind of on the same page.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so one of the things I've been looking at is how to combine the development standards to make it simpler, so there's not a lot of repetition between site plan and subdivision review. There's certain things that really only apply, I'd say, to subdivision that wouldn't do a site plan, like creation of a new road. But I think it would, if we can do that, if we can combine the standards just to simplify our document easier for an applicant, especially if they have to do, if they're doing site plan and subdivision together, just streamline the process, make it easier. I'd like to do that. Haven't really had a chance to do that yet. So the second point, so the first thing on the second page is to move the waiver language from subdivision to general regulations chapter. I looked into this a little bit actually over the last couple of days. I don't think we can do that. Because the waiver that's in subdivision is only allowed for subdivisions in statute. So that is not a general waiver or site plan for other development review. So it really is specific to just subdivision. There are other waivers in the regulations, conventional waiver, which can be for height waiver,
Can be
waivers for buffers.
Can be what kind of, can be what kind of thing?
It can be for any.
Oh, for anything, okay.
But that, moving that waiver language from subdivision needs to go back to just subdivision. So I think one of the things I didn't say here, so moving from site plan review is the language about the steep slope, like that we've been dealing with Pinewood, to the general development standard. So any sort of development would be cognizant of that, or they'd be held to that standard. So right now it really is only just site plan, that standard. So ETC next, small changes. I'm not sure there are any small changes. I would like to see some changes, but I'm not sure that fits into this round. If anyone has any, like Josh, maybe you can think of something, knowing that you were more involved.
I mean, nothing off the top of my head without it in front of me.
Well, and this is our first little discussion about this, or big discussion about this, so we'll be talking more, so.
One thing we might want to throw into that, I have ghosts of Ned, but with the recent, presentation talking about green roofs and stuff like that, maybe we start qualifying some of the building standards, such as the green roofs and or recycling and or, I mean, we had a number of these things that past Commissioner Ned Daly had presented as far as I think it was gray water collection, or I don't remember exactly what it was, but he had a number of standards that could be included in buildings. So the solar, the green roofing, and identifying some of those components that might gain a greater acceptance of a building.
Could be requirements, you think?
Be requirements or building standards or requirements. Maybe we give an allowance on X if we have green roofing and solar included in XYZ.
But, I mean, I think that I think it was Sharon that at the last meeting that mentioned that some of these green roofs are not well maintained. And so coming up with some kind of
Maintenance standards.
Yeah.
But that's not us. I mean, that's the building owners need to do that. If you don't maintain it, the building goes to heck. So you know, with respect to, you know, public comments that were made, that's, I don't think that I wouldn't think we're in the middle. We don't tell them to keep your roof tower up a day, you know, your membranes, that's their best interest to keep those things correct. I don't know. It feels like that
Well,
there's a line that we start. I don't think there's a line that we don't need to go over.
Well, I guess I'm somewhere in the middle, because I think that if we are allowing people to do things that cut down on what they have to do on the ground because they're doing something green on the roof, then we need to make sure that we need to have something in place to give the town some authority to make sure that it's maintained and that it serves the function that it was intended to serve, in place of something that
Right.
they were.
Yeah, and I don't know, you know, this is a good conversation to have with Anne, who's, you know, the stormwater engineer. She consider that, or does the state consider that meeting some of the stormwater requirements? And if it does, then should be some standard they have to maintain.
And to that point that we made earlier, is this sort of building code requirement already in place in other any of our neighboring
And would the
communities?
state have some
Well, the
review over that too?
consideration with green roofs also, if there are retrofits, that then you have to do a structural analysis.
Right.
Because, you know, you've changed the weight on the building. And,
I don't want to bring I mean, green roofs is just an example. You know, it's building technologies for, what's the term, is it net
Green,
zero?
Just like,
Energy
Green,
standards.
yeah, I mean, it's just.
oh, yeah, I forget what it's called. I used to know.
I never did well, so we're gonna rely on you to
Oh.
dig it up.
It's gonna come.
I mean, that to me is, and I understand about keeping it up to date, but there's a point at which, are we in the business of building, do we do the building code? Who manages the building codes and structures at this point?
Or do we just not consider that as part of the green space that we want?
Well, I wasn't
in the
even,
project?
I guess I shouldn't have used a green roof as an example, because I wasn't talking green space per se. It was more for stormwater management, it was more for a living roof was kicking, you know, oxygen nation
Yeah,
and.
and maybe meeting, you know, the state has goals for meeting energy production levels, and play our part in town by implementing.
here and
Yeah, we're requiring them, and some municipalities do.
And if there's something that somebody's offering as an offset so that they can get a waiver, like they're going to put in solar panels to have an extra 5 feet on their building, or they're going to have a car share car to have less parking spaces. Well, we have to have some way of making sure that they keep doing that forever into the future, because otherwise they could just decide, well, we're not going to do free bus passes after the first year because we got approval. So we'd have to make sure that it's something we can actually logically keep following up on, and it's not something that's just going to be a logistic headache too.
That's why I was thinking more building standards and you know, things like, not to say it's real or not, but like a bus pass, that only works if you've got buses. And bus routes can come and go. So I mean that. So for an example, to your point, that's no longer a valid contribution.
Right, and that's a difficult thing if somebody's, you know, they're trying to ask for a waiver for having less parking by having all of these parking demand management strategies, but if they don't carry them through.
But maybe
then
we
you've
don't make
lost
them.
that.
Maybe we don't make them waivers.
That's right.
And it's an if then. If you have a solar panels, or if your building is net zero energy usage, then you can, you know, do this, something like that. It's going to be more expensive to build. Is the general concept that we've heard so far.
It's,
At least in
the standards are LEED.
Lead, thank you. That's it. I remember that now. Anyways, that's just something like that, especially in like the town center area, the ETC next area. That would be, we want concentrated growth. We're not necessarily going to get exactly the building designs that we want, or the facades that we want or that maybe can work. So what are the trade-offs? We got design elements in the ETC next plan, but can we also incorporate lead protocol, lead requirements maybe?
I think the part in the zoning that talks about how do you get a waiver for extra density is good because it provides very specific things that you can do to get that extra density.
Is that for the PUD?
Oh, it might just be in the PUD part. But it's nice to have the very specific requirements that you can point toward, because I think that makes it a lot easier for us reviewing it. And it also, it just makes it easier and more consistent. And something that's like a LEED certified building, which was one of those options, that has its own certification process that we don't have to do that certification process. And that's in the owner's interest to do it, and they've already bought things front.
And the if we can reference like LEED standards that are not built into our regulations, then our regulations aren't going to be static and outdated as soon as a technology change occurs. So if we can reference out, especially if it's state statute or anything that provides, energy, whatever, a measurable benefit. I don't know. I mean, we ran into this exact sort of thing when Lowe's came in and they wanted to use LED lighting in the sign, and we didn't have any provision in the regulations for LED lighting. We specified lighting, we specified halogen, we specified metal halide, we specified the Kelvin temperatures, we specified all sorts of shit, but we didn't have we didn't allow for LEDs. We did eventually. I don't remember how we did it. I don't know if we just bit the bullet and wavered it or
Changed to backlit.
yeah, and it was a different because our regulation was very precise on lighting. We didn't have an easy avenue to entertain LED lighting.
And then recently we just changed that again through
Yeah.
lighting,
Yeah.
and it was very more open-ended to the desired effect is what it was.
And that's maybe what we can focus on is some sort of energy return, stormwater reduction, any of those measurable effects, green space, if it's something that we can, that can be done through building standards, whatever.
I should know this, but can the planning commission waive impact fees, or is that beyond the purview of the planning commission? Is that?
That's the select board.
That's the
Yeah.
select board.
Yeah.
And in the future, it's going to be the DRB,
Right.
so it's going to be a yes or no more of a.
Okay,
Anything else, Source?
done.
Good. Anybody, Josh, you got anything you want to throw in?
I'm all set, thanks. Is my screen coming off really fuzzy to you too? Yeah, I don't know what's going on here. I was trying to fix it and you just made it fuzzier.
Put your
But
glasses
no,
on,
nothing.
Josh.
Oh, we've reached scream o'clock. Okay, yep, I'm all set.
All right, anybody want to offer any other comments or questions or anything? Do we have anything else? I don't even have the agenda still up, I don't believe.
No, that
Oh, I do,
was-
right down here. Okay,
No, we don't even have other business on here.
all right. Ian, is he one of our,
So what page did we get
Applications?
to?
We didn't go page by page.
We just went through the highlights.
the highlights.
Okay. Should be a comma on one of these things.
she has a grammatical for you. Welcome, Ian. We don't have a whole lot going on at this stage, but any commentary that you'd like to offer or anything? Engagement?
Fascinating. I've been watching intently, listening to all the changes that are coming. It's definitely interesting, and there's a lot that's coming down the line.
All right, with that, I would gladly take a motion.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
Moved by Shu, seconded by Paula. She beat you. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries 6-0. We are opposed. We are adjourned 8:06 PM.